More importantly, given that this is a Formula One event, I'm an avid tifoso, and I took everything in me not to pull up in full Ferrari gear today. And I'm also a massive UFC fan. So Hugo, what you guys pulled off on Noche with the sphere in terms of was just incredible. So more importantly, though, the man that we're really here to meet is Mr. Adashek. Jonathan is the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications at IBM. And so thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent.
It's like a nice, intimate conversation.
Yes. We'll make sure we leave
Should we move up a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, let's just chill around. So I'm just going to start off with, give a baseline to our audience here in terms of your role and your responsibilities as SVP of Marketing and Communications.
Yeah, I've been with IBM for about 5 years, and I oversee marketing, communications, CSR, public affairs, federal government business development. I'm the executive sponsor for our work in the Middle East. So, keeps me busy, but I'm lucky. I've got a great team of people who I get the opportunity to work with, and they're really, really smart. And they figure out how to do really interesting things, like partnering with Ferrari on F1, like partnering with UFC on some innovative stats that we're going to be doing, the Insight Engine. And it's, I think, the best job in the world. I love it.
And your path to this job was pretty diverse. I mean, everything from automotive and government to you do a lot in the sustainability space. So how does that all come together with your role?
I started out in politics. I worked for Bill Clinton when he was running for re-election, and worked in the White House and Treasury Department, and then worked for John Kerry when he was running for president, and a few other random things. But the way I look at it is, it's all the same. I mean, ultimately what I'm trying to do as doing marketing is getting people to vote for candidate IBM. And the way they vote for the candidate is different. It's with money. It's with commitment to resources. It's with trust. But that's really what I'm trying to do. The hard thing is, on a political campaign, there's an election day. There's like one day on the horizon, then you know if you win or lose. For us, it's almost like every day is an election day because there's a new product launch coming out, or a new piece of news, or a new thing that you're trying to continually move people. So it makes it a little more challenging, but I look at all the work we do today. When I started talking about campaigns internally, people were thinking about traditional marketing campaigns. I was like, no, I don't care about a traditional marketing campaign. I'm talking about a political campaign. I'm talking about how do we go push people to embrace IBM. It's a place where historically there's a saying is you don't get fired for hiring IBM. But how do we actually modernize that and make it? So that's how it all comes together.
Okay. And in terms of, so we actually have, we're grateful for our partnership with IBM. We do so much across the globe with you. When I step back and I think of your role and how would I identify the priorities, that kind of scares me in terms of just how broad that scale is. But if you had to pull up and really see, like, what are the key priorities that are driving you in this role today?
It's pretty simple. If I go back to April 6th, when Arvind Krishna became CEO, he said we're going to be the leading hybrid cloud, April 6th of 2020, sorry. He said we're going to be the leading hybrid cloud and AI company. People were not talking about generative AI back then the way they are today. And we had already made a bet in hybrid cloud in a significant way with purchasing a company called Red Hat for $34 billion. And that is where we've really gone to focus our business. We've spun off a company that's now known as Kyndryl, which was 90,000 people and $19 billion in revenue, and people looked at us like we were crazy. But our value was increased because we didn't need it because of the focus. So what am I looking at and how am I prioritizing? It is tying back to that. How do we be the leading hybrid cloud and AI company? And how do I look at the revenue and the pipeline and the reputation objectives to get there, right? To get to 60, what did we do last year? 60 billion, 62 billion? So, I mean, we're a good-sized company, but there are plenty of big companies that are a lot bigger than us. To get there though, you have to do like, I don't know, $100+ billion in pipeline. When Arvin asked me to take on marketing, and I had never done marketing before, and he said, go home and think about this and let's talk in the morning. I didn't sleep well because I was like, how the hell do you create $100 billion in pipeline? I have no idea how to do that. But that's where I tie my efforts to. That's how I prioritize. Is it helping the business? If it's not, I don't do it.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we're, as an agency, are seeing pretty much a consistent priority across a number of large brands we work with is this notion of how do we do more with less, and more not meaning more of the same things, but in terms of how do we drive more impact with greater efficiency. And when we start to look at factors such as AI, and in terms of even how you internalize it within your organization to achieve whether it's the greater impact or the greater efficiency, is that something that is a priority for you?
Oh yeah, AI is a huge priority for us. Not just because we make it, because we're an AI, software's 45% of our revenue today. But it's a huge priority because we're trying to do the same thing. Everybody in this room, I'm willing to bet, is like, your bosses are saying, here's $1, give me $1.10 back, right? Here's $1 and make it spend like it's $2, right? So, you know this, being our partner, we're using AI on what events, to figure out what events we go to and who we want to get there, to a place that we're doing half the number of events. We've been scared off the MC. We're doing half the number, so we can just keep going. Once the last person leaves, then we'll stop. We're doing half the number of.
Last person is the camera.
Yeah, we're doing half the number of events today that we were 2 years ago. We're getting 5% more client interests out of those events at a lower cost. We're looking at media, and how do we use media, how do we use AI to better target our media? We're taking 30 to 40% off every dollar in our media placements now by using AI and getting more specific. And as we do that, it unlocks a whole nother avenue for us to take people on a more relevant and personalized journey. A lot of people talk about personalization. I think it's totally wrong. Because we all get those, I hope I'm not offending anybody who's a credit card company, I just left MasterCard. We all get those credit card applications in the mail. Addressed to me, dear Jonathan Adashek, you've been approved for a $500 line of credit with whatever. Into the garbage goes, right? It's personalized, but it's not relevant. So we've got to look, I really am trying to push this hard whenever I talk to people. We've got to get past personalization. We've got to make it relevant. You've got to break through. And you've got to be able to take people on a journey that's meaningful.
Yeah. There was actually a great panel discussion earlier around influencers, and this is something that I'm an avid Formula One fan, and I remember the first I was, following Formula One as a kid all through Europe, and then I moved here when I'm 19, and I go to Phoenix for the first time, and I realized what a relevance gap there is. And we'd show up on a Saturday and the grandstands were packed for NASCAR races, and then this race on Sunday and the grandstands are empty. And I was just coming from Monaco, where it was like you couldn't get close to the cars. So it was, but that is around like how do you make it relevant in terms of what are the connections that are really people are passionate about. And actually, you wrote something, I believe it was earlier this year, it was a perspective or an article where you were talking about, like, obviously everyone sees the power of AI and its use, but not everyone understands like the power that you don't see, the things that, what it takes to actually make AI work from an enterprise level. And that's okay, like not everyone needs to understand that, but there are individuals that do, and they're the ones that can actually help that, make that a reality. And so in order to make the connection with those individuals, you talked about the importance of moving beyond just storytelling and just really going into like, okay, how do we understand what they're passionate about? How do I get them to actually hone in? And sports is one of those levers.
Yep.
So given that we are here for Formula One, let's shift to sports in terms of what do you see in this space that, in terms of where we are today, where it's going, and what's exciting about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. the thing that I really think about is, especially as I'm talking about technology, there are a lot of people that don't understand some of the stuff that we do, right? When you start talking about 10 trillion parameter AI models, first, does everybody understand what a parameter is? Never mind thinking about trillions of parameters. Like, those numbers just don't mean anything to people in certain regards, right? So for me, it's about story showing instead of storytelling. Example I'd have for you is early in my career, like the first week at IBM, we do a lot of work in quantum computing. And I said to the guy who runs quantum computing, I said, can you explain to me what quantum computing is? Pretend I don't know what it is. He said, yes. I can take your socks and shoes and put them on the other side of the universe in the exact same state. To this day, I still do not understand what that means. I don't. Except for my boss, the CEO, told me, he sat and scratched his head for a second. He's like, no, he's wrong. So, but it's story showing, and sports is a great way to do that. So if you look at something like the Masters, we've been doing the Masters for over 30 years. We do the Masters app in partnership with Augusta National. Many people would say that's the best app in sports today. We got one hand in the back.
Why do they say that?
Because of the experience that you can have there. The fact that you can get onto the app, and on Thursday and Friday, there's not a lot of broadcast. A lot of people are at the office, or if there's broadcast, but a lot of people are working and can't watch. But they can pull out their phone and turn on the app, and they can watch the 4 golfers or 6 golfers or whatever it is that they want to. And you can watch every shot of every player. You can watch a full round in under 3 minutes. Like, a full round takes hours, and you can watch it in 3 minutes. Not only that, but then you start looking at the predictive nature. This last year, we took every shot that had been played on the course in the last 8 years and figured out how everybody played different holes. So as you were coming up to that, somebody was coming up to a hole, and you're like, are they going to make the cut? Are they going to miss the cut? People could look at that on the app and go, he's going to play here, and historically, when Tiger has played it, or Phil, or whoever will, when they play it to the right, they get a birdie. If they go more up the middle, they've gotten bogeys over the last 8 years. So you start thinking about that, and that can make a big difference. When you look at something like the US Open, where we're, again, predicting what's going on and giving insights into the match. And a lot of people think of the US Open and you think center court, the stuff I see on TV. There's 18 courts at the US Open. And there are people playing on those courts all the time. And we're providing AI-generated commentary across all those 18 courts. And we're taking, across the US Open, we will pull in more than 7 million points of data across that 2 weeks that we will then help create a different immersive experience. We will then create opportunities to be, as I said, predictive, looking at structured and unstructured. There was one year during COVID, there's a certain tennis player who was playing fantastic, out of their mind. And everybody was like, this person's gonna win the US Open. And we said, unstructured data that they put out there for everybody to see. This is not us like stalking somebody. This is just somebody actively pushing out, showed that that person was a huge homebody. And this was the last tournament between them playing and getting back home where they hadn't been in like 6 months because of COVID. And we were like, we think that's going to impact them. Their head's going to be focused on getting home. They're not going to make it to the end. It's exactly what happened. So it makes, when you start looking at those sorts of things, it gives people a new way to enjoy and understand the sport.
And you're enabling fan engagement, better fan engagement directly to the fans themselves, but you're also working with individuals that are, whether it's commentators or giving them more real data, correct? In terms of...
So if I go to back to Augusta for a second, most golfers will spend the night, every night, on our app, looking at the app and understanding how they played a hole, how their competitors played a hole, and what they need to do for the next day. I've had golfer after golfer every year tell me that, and caddy after caddy. So that changes the way they play. With the deal we just did with UFC, The insights engine that we're creating together is going to give new insights both to the fans, but also to the commentators. So there's new data that's going to be there for those commentators that they can talk about things in a much different way that is going to be more insightful for the average fan and for the passionate fan. I was at the fights on Saturday night in New York.
In New York?
Yes. And as much as I was in my seat, I was more in the back talking to people and figuring out, because we're rolling this out. And when we start talking about it, and I'm an average UFC fan, my son is a big one. But as I was talking to people who are more interested in it, and you could start to see the nuances, then people started going, wait a minute, this is not what I thought it was when I walked in. So it's really going to change the way that I think people can engage and become much bigger fans.
Yeah. I'll go back to the UFC, but in terms of, so when you think of like IBM, again, coming back and looking at, like, so what's unique in terms of what IBM brings to the table with those types of offerings? Is it?
You know, a big part of this is that we've been doing this for a long time. Like UFC is new, Ferrari's new, but the others are all 30 plus year relationships. And the way we co-create and think about together, what do you want to bring? I've got somebody on my team who sits at the All England Lawn and Tennis Club and is working with the club throughout the year. Their office is there to understand how, for a 2-week tournament, what are we going to do? How do we change that? And I think that's a big part of it. The other is our approach on AI and what's going on is different than others, in the sense that we really try and create a model that is fit for purpose, and a model that's based on the data that the client has, or the partner has, or wants to pull in. There are other models that are great models out there, but they are sort of vast, huge models that can do all these different things, and they pull in a ton of data from different places, which can cause hallucinations and that kind of stuff. And we're really trying to be much more focused. And really, we've spent a lot of time thinking about how does a fan engage, how does it change, and how do we make sure we've got a great partnership, not a sponsorship, a partnership.
Yeah, and that's something that I've heard you speak about before in terms of the difference between like a sponsorship and a real partnership, right? And we'll switch to Formula One now. When I look at a lot of the engagements that we see with brands that are around Formula One, there's two sides of the spectrum which are obvious, right? Like Formula One has such reach that if you can get your logo just visible, then obviously that there's a benefit towards that. But then on the complete other end of the spectrum, it's such a customer intimacy play in terms of bringing your high prospect clients there, in terms of but in the middle is really around where you create that authentic connection between the brand and the sport, and story showing around, like, in terms of what is it that IBM does, whether it's around the fan engagement around a team or around the sport itself. That's beneficial. So stepping back, I guess my first question to you would be around Formula One. Do you have any favorite memory or favorite moment? Are you passionate about the sport? Or?
I've become more and more passionate about it. I'll admit I wasn't a huge fan. Somebody I grew up with, his kids started watching it, and they really got me into it. And we would call each other on Sunday mornings. Did you see that? Oh my God! What? But now that I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of different teams and getting to know what's going on and going to a bunch of different races, it's an exciting sport. It's a fun sport to watch, and I can't wait for what we're going to do to roll out what we're going to do with Ferrari in the next season. It's the same. It's a similar approach. It's how do we make a more engaging opportunity for the fans, especially. I mean, let's be realistic about Formula One in general. It's an aspirational sport. What did I hear earlier? Only 1% of Formula One fans ever make it to a track. And then if you take that even further, How many Formula One fans have a McLaren, have a Ferrari, have a high-end Mercedes? How many of them have a Red Bull? Well, they might be drinking them, but that's, but it becomes a very aspirational, but how do you make that more personal connection for them? That's what we're really going after. And it's going to be super exciting. Yeah. I flew out this morning from New York, and there were a ton of people in their gear, and there were a lot of Ferrari people. And I was just sitting there going, I can't wait to see how they're engaging in the future, because it's going to be so different than what everybody else is doing.
What you can't wait for is to be in Monza, in a sea of red tifosi, celebrating Ferrari's win next year. I don't know who saw that this year in terms of the scenes and celebrations. It was basically what sports is all about. That moment where you're saying, like, how can I connect to someone's passion? That was just an amazing thing. So that's obviously your number one objective for partnering with Ferrari.
Yep.
But how else would you define success if you look, a year or 2 years down this partnership? Like, what are the types of statements that you'd be able to say, this is walking the talk of why we're in this space?
For us, it's about that experience we're going to create, both on the app, but then also when we're going to bring people in. Because when we do a partnership like this, hospitality is very important for us. But it's not just hospitality to give somebody drinks and let them watch the match. We take people on tours so they can see how the technology is actually coming to life in the back of behind the scenes. And the ability to understand how that is moving our business forward, that's success. I want to see Ferrari win. I want to see Ferrari be better on the track. I want to see better fan engagement for them. Those are really important metrics for us. But equally as important, how does it move the needle for my business, my peers, my colleagues in the company to really make it a different experience?
Yeah. And that's challenging at a time when I was in the paddock last year, and there's so much competition for your attention, right? I mean, it's such a sensational experience where you have to figure out a way, like, how can I actually capture this person's attention and make the connection with the technology, so it has to be authentic, because if it comes across as anything else, it's going to be, you're taking me away from why I'm here.
100%. And it's breaking through, not just in the paddock, but just breaking through in general is really tough to do. Yeah. There's so much out there, and that's why we've got to be able to better target our clients, our prospects, know more about where we're going and why we're going there and what messages and what content we need to deliver to really try and break through with relevancy is really so important for us.
So I have one more question before I turn it to you. What advice would you give marketers that are entering the space in terms of better fan engagement in sports?
And set your principles, what you're really after at the beginning, and hold firm to them. Because what's going to happen as you go through a negotiation, that you have to remember, you're negotiating with people who are great people. I'm not criticizing the people or the organizations that we're working with, but they have different objectives than we do. And it is very easy to be pushed to a side into a zone where works for them. That's the way they've done it in the past, or it meets their objective. And you got to hold your ground. We've been very lucky in these last 2 deals. We've worked with amazing people at Ferrari and at UFC who really were like, okay, we want to understand, we want to spend time with you to understand what's important to IBM and what are you going to get out of this? What are your metrics for success? How do you do that? And, we had people from the UFC come to Augusta with us. So they could see, and Ferrari, come to Augusta with us and see it firsthand. How do we activate? What do we expect from people? What's our level of expectation on white glove service as we do that? How do we tell those stories differently? And that was really important as we went through the negotiations.
Partnership. Questions from the audience?
I'll ask Jonathan. IBM, iconic brand, been around for a long time. How do you maintain brand relevancy as part of your marketing? on a day-to-day basis when the competition is so stiff these days?
You know, it's a great question. And the story I would say is, I got this job, and I called one of my best friends. And I told him I got the offer. And he said to me, he's like, I am so excited for you. Because I've been looking for a while. And he said, I'm so excited, but I have one question for you. What does IBM do? I could argue that would be okay if it was a consumer on the street. This guy happened to be Satya Nadella's chief of staff. If the chief of staff at Microsoft doesn't understand what IBM does, the company had a problem. And that was part of the reason why I took this job. When Arvind Krishna became CEO on April 6th, 2020, we got much more focused. Much, much more focused. And because we're sticking to that focus, because we've gone from 43 different campaigns across the company to one campaign, and we've really got everything aligned underneath that, and we're taking the time to make sure we're doing those things right, that's how we're keeping the brand relevancy. We also have to recognize we don't have a consumer business. But at the same point, we're making I'm willing to bet almost everybody in this room had some interaction with IBM today without even knowing it. If you took money out of an ATM, if you checked into a hotel, if you took an airline, if you got a rental car, many other things, right? Telling the stories in different ways and bringing them to life is really helping us move the needle. And as we move the needle, we also continue to get relevancy and get attention. Our performance is getting much better, just candidly speaking on the street. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I mean, thanks for sticking around for this immersive one-on-one. I feel like I really and I am sad that I didn't make that investment trip. But that must have been our R&D team. But
It was
on the brand side,
Alone and Rami.
Alone and Rami, yeah, amazing guys. But from the brand side, we're excited. I think everything we're hearing, at least what I'm hearing from now, is the innovation that comes, the history we bring, and really just how we're going to be able to tap into that amazing AI knowledge that you have to make our sport easy to consume, easy to learn, like you said. And the show, and the story showing that you just mentioned. How do you feel that these resources you have, this AI, this engine, lots of these, can continue to evolve into more of the outside of the sports realm, right? Into more of the community. Earlier in one of the panels we were talking about AI being used for one of these solving these world problems, or at least alleviating some of that. Let's kind of hear your take on that, because I'm excited for the sports element.
We're deeply involved in that. So we have an open source approach on AI, as we do on our hybrid cloud work. And to that end, we're using, for example, NASA data, which was open source. We started with NASA early on. I think we were probably the first one to open source, use their data collaboratively. And we're working, one example is we're working with Abu Dhabi to identify heat islands in Abu Dhabi so that they can take those, understand where they are and take action to fix them and to remedy those. We're also recognizing that AI is going to have a significant, or we have recognized, AI has a significant impact on everybody's life. And AI is going to augment people's careers. And those people who use AI are going to excel past those who do not. That is my opinion. And so to that end, we've laid out a goal of skilling 30 million people by 2030 to make sure that people have access to skills and training. And this isn't the 275,000 people that work inside of IBM. This is 30 million people around the world. Because people need to continue to evolve their skills, especially now today, that the average shelf life of a technology skill is now just barely under 3 years. So we all in this room need to continually be updating our skills, and we've got to be doing that for the next generation and for people who are trying to make career transitions and people who are in college now. I mean, I have this conversation at home with my daughter. She's taking a computer science class, and she's like, I hate it. It's worthless. I'm never going to use it. I'm not going to do my homework. I was like, yes, you are, because you're doing your homework, period, end of sentence. But like, we have a regular conversation. It's going to change her life, and she's got to start embracing it, because otherwise she's going to fall behind. And we're really involved in a lot of those things. We have a bunch of sustainability accelerator programs in different countries around the world where we provide our consulting support, our technology support to help nonprofits change the way that sustainability and technology, we provide technology as well, like a nonprofit like Heifer International will change the way they're doing their projects in a country, pick it whether it's Malawi or we've got stuff in Canada, we've got it all over the world. Really looking at those. So it's not just AI on the track. It's not just AI for the big banks. It's AI, it's hybrid cloud, it's the technology, it's the skills for communities far and wide. When you have 275,000 people working for your company, or in 170 plus countries, we got a lot of responsibility, we recognize it. We're a fortunate place to be.
That's great. And lastly, I would say, I would have told you AI 4 years ago that you would be in a random night at Madison Square Garden, your whole political history would come back, as well as Mayor May all in one night. As that was.
I wouldn't have believed it.
Jonathan, I'm IBM alum. I worked for IBM back in the day. It's actually
We're everywhere.
I'm super happy that I started with IBM. We all started around. I thought it was very informative, and I'm like blown away about like how IBM started around after all these years, redefined itself, always been, you know, a major player, but quietly. Like, so if you think about it, the sexiest companies are NVIDIA, Tesla, like everyone associates like those big names as like, hey, that's AI, right? But like, I think like most people kind of forget about IBM being in that, and like you said, like, it's almost like, what does IBM even do? Most people don't even know. Like, I think you nailed so many good points, and I think two of the things I was gonna say was like, one, I really don't know, you know, like you said, like everyone knows of AI, but do you really know the power of it and all that stuff? Like, I didn't realize until you mentioned it with the app, like the golfers are using it, and the tennis example you gave with, you know, the guy was like missing home for 6 months, and like, that's wild, that's, you know, blew me away. I think the one question I had for you was like, in regards to so many data points, you know, like, obviously, with so much data, you could always get analysis paralysis. You don't know what to look at. How do you shift through that much data and figure out, like, hey, we need to focus on this, or how?
Me personally?
Yeah.
So, first, I'm lucky. I've got an amazing team. Like, I feel bad for them because I ask questions that they just are like. They've been doing marketing for 20 plus years, and I'm doing it for. January will be 3 years, right? I was not a marketer when I took this over. I'm still like, talk me through SQL versus MQL versus, you know, the basics sometimes, just because I want to make sure. But it's really about understanding what's the objective of the company. What's the objective of the business? And where are we against that objective? And then figuring out what are the levers that can get pulled. And it's counting on the people around me who are experts in their field to say, here's what I think we should do. Here's what I think we should do on .com. Here's what I think we should do with media. Here's what I think we should do with content. Here's what I think we should do with events. And then it becomes a question of which ones do you prioritize? And I'll be very honest. I'm fortunate in the sense that IBM is investing in my career, and I have an executive coach. One of the things that I've talked through with my executive coach many times is like, how do you make the decision quickly without all the facts or without all the expertise? And I was talking to a friend who's also in the coaching business, and he's writing an article about the concept of the axis of the amount of knowledge versus the speed at which you work, and where do people sit on that axis. And are you one of these people who can move fast with little knowledge and just the basic facts, or do you have to read one more book and get one more report and whatever? And for me, something I wrestle with, but it is really looking at the data, looking at the facts, and going, how do we get there? But then it's also for me now looking at some new tools. My team has developed a natural language prompt engine that looks across what we're doing, that can help me identify what's the next best place to put a dollar.
So where are you in that axis?
When it comes to marketing, I'm more in the I want more information because I haven't done it long enough. When it comes on the comms side or the CSR side, I will move very fast, like super quick. So I'm trying to bring the marketing side back to the faster side.
And just one other thing, you know when you talk about some of the models and whatnot,
Yeah.
is there anything that just blew you away? You're like, wow, like there must be so many cool things that you see on a day-to-day when it comes to like the AI, like from like, I don't know, consumer standpoint or just like a normal person that isn't in the IBM space. I feel like you're working with, like you said, you were talking about earlier, the quantum whatever. I mean, like there's got to be some really cool modeling or things that come out of there that you get to see on a day-to-day, right?
There's a lot of amazing things that I get to see. There's a lot of amazing things I talk to people about and have conversations about what we could do to help them and then continue those, bring those to life. It's a really interesting opportunity and place perch to sit.
Someone said to me that AI might not take your job, but somebody that uses AI is going to take your job, and it's very similar to what you said. And I was wondering if you have any advice for like us in the room of how we can make sure that we're constantly staying involved using AI, maybe when we're at a company that isn't necessarily super AI forward. Like I've worked at a very AI forward company, and right now I'm not. So
Where are you now? If you
I'm
don't
at
mind me
Vivo. We're a music video company. We're owned by Universal and
Yeah.
Sony. So obviously AI is a big thing in the music space. But in terms of how we're using it right now, it's not front and center.
Yeah. So I think, I always try and figure out where can I take a learning about, pick the topic that I'm at. Out of every meeting I'm in, out of every interaction I have, it's like, what's the learning? And then I go back and I write down a bunch of stuff. That's how my brain works. Like I get my notes for a briefing document, and then I go through and I write out the highlighted points, and people are like, well, how would you rewrite that? That's just how I learn. But I also would encourage people to get online.
Yeah.
And really figure out, just do a basic class online. There's so much free stuff. We've
Does
got
IBM offer anything?
Skills Build,
specifically?
IBM Skills Build, it's free, and it's out there. And I have this conversation with people who are, my wife's best friend, her kid, 2 of her 5 kids are taking gap years. I think it's now like 3 or 4 years. They're not sure what they want to do. And I'm like, go get certificates online to be a cybersecurity person. You're not going to start at $30,000 a year. You're going to start at $130,000 a year, and you don't need a college degree. So I really would try and embrace that as well. And then the last thing I'd say, it's not necessarily AI, but it's a way of thinking. Because I think what's happening with AI is things are also moving faster, which means people need to change the way they're thinking. If you haven't read The Geek Way, I highly recommend The Geek Way. There's a lot of insights in that book about new ways to think and new ways to approach things. And it's an easy read, and Andrew McAfee's really interesting. And I think it's, because it's AI, it's culture, it's learning. All 3 of those have to change.
If someone on your team writes a strategy using AI, do you consider it cheating, or do you consider them smart for doing it that way?
I'd actually, if they're using our tools, I'd be okay if it's a starting point.
Yeah.
If they're using
It's a
other
good
tools,
framework. Yeah.
if they're using other tools, I'm over it.
Yeah,
No, well, we have some regulations inside the company
of
about
course.
what you
This
can.
information is shared. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you somebody could take 150 lines of code and put it into it.
Yeah. All companies have to tell their employees to be very careful now.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's why we're careful. But I think if somebody's going to use it to help give you some thoughts, I'm all for it. We're seeing the.
I think we are almost at time, but
15 minutes over, but this was such a great conversation. I didn't want it to end. This is actually a
the race
masterclass.
doesn't start till later. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you all. Thank you all for staying.